Hello, and welcome to another episode of In the Spotlight. I'm your host, Arthur Bogdansky. Today we will be looking into the study of psychology and the unknown effects it has on our daily lives. One of the unseen aspects of psychology is social norms, which AP Psychology students broke for an assignment. Ryan Wolf and I followed the progress of one student breaking a social norm. Social norms. They govern our everyday behavior without us even noticing. Simple things like who we talk to and what we talk about are established by the social norms we live by. In the past couple weeks, psychology students have been challenging these unspoken rules. Mr. Draher, the AP Psychology teacher at Hoover, explains the goal of having students break social norms.
So the whole point of breaking the norm is to allow students to understand that we follow these norms without thinking, and that if we do break them, people kind of look at us funny, but nothing bad happens.
While no one's getting in trouble, there are still consequences for running against the grain.
And by breaking a norm, we actually understand this is not right behavior. I don't like it. I'm just gonna stick with the group, stick with the appropriate behavior. Typical social norms is walking down the halls. We usually walk on the right side. Why? Because that's the side we drive on.
One student breaking a social norm is Jason Rojas. He explains to us which social norm he broke.
In the library, we have these tight friend groups. Basically, they sit at each of the tables and everyone spreads out. And I decided it would be interesting to see what would happen if a new element joined the group.
Even though Rojas understands it is an experiment, he expresses his discomfort nonetheless.
I grabbed the chair and I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, this is about to be the most awkward thing I've ever done in my life.
What follows after he sits down is close to what he imagined.
I looked at them and I was like, hey, what's up? And then everyone's just looking at me and I was like, so I failed my English test today.
It doesn't get any more comfortable for Rojas the longer he sits there, but he does learn a valuable lesson.
One thing I've learned is definitely social norms are much more powerful than I may have anticipated.
As Rojas experienced, it's amazing what a class assignment can open your eyes to. Mr. Draher, along with one of his favorite psychology students, Nick Bogdansky, are here with me now to continue the conversation about psychology. Thanks for coming to talk with me, guys.
Oh, not a problem.
No problem.
Now, we talked a little about social norms that we saw with the package there, and I just want to go a little bit into some context and ask you, Mr. Draher, how did you get into teaching in the first place?
I got into teaching because growing up, I always heard stories. I have family members who are teachers. My grandfather worked at Akron Public Schools his whole career. My aunt and uncle were school teachers, and that was always something that I was interested in doing. And then it wasn't really until I got to high school where I had Mr. Charles Collier for AP US History, and just seeing his passion for teaching and passion for the subject really influenced me into deciding to become a teacher.
Yeah, and so I know that you went to Ashland University, so education was your major?
Yes, education was my major. I actually signed up to be a kindergarten teacher, but after a semester I decided to teach high school social studies.
And so along your college experience and even into teaching, how did you get into psychology?
Psychology was something that I never really thought about. It wasn't until my freshman year at Ashland University that I took Psych 101 with Dr. Metzger, and that was my first experience with psychology. Loved it. And I almost minored in psychology. I would have had to have stayed an extra semester, but after 4 years I was ready to move on. But if I took one more class, I would have got a minor in psychology. And when it comes to teaching, my third year of teaching, I was calling the principal's office, and they said, next year we want you to teach AP Psych. And I said, okay, and I've been doing it ever since.
Wow, well, that's good for me because I love your class.
Thank you.
Now, Nick, I wanted to ask you how you got into AP Psychology. What led you to take the class? The GPA, interest level, college credit?
I was interested in it. I was interested in learning a lot of psychology. I thought it'd help me out later in life. And I was a little interested in it for the GPA because it's 5.0.
And what has stuck out from this class so far to you?
Well, what I really like about Mr. Draher's class is he shows a lot of videos and gives a lot of good examples that require us to join in on the lecture and stuff like that. It's a lot different than other classes. I like it a lot. It's just very interactive.
And what has been your favorite assignment of the year so far?
Probably our brain drawing project where we put it on a poster. That was pretty fun.
And Mr. Dre, do you have a favorite assignment of the year?
I always enjoy the norms.
Yeah.
We've talked about that, and just how making students step out of their shell to break that norm. I also like later in the year where we do a lot of introspection. We'll take a look at more of what goes on, what your thought process is for some things you have to deal with. How can we deal with those stressors and things that stress you out? But I try to, like Nick said, I try to change it up some, make it more interactive, to not just sit there and lecture the whole time, but also get students involved and get them to work with the material.
Yeah, and psychology students definitely learn a lot about themselves.
Right.
I know, of course, you did the social norms experiment, Nick, so what social norm did you break when you did your experiment?
I had to go to the mall with a black dot on my forehead and see what attention I would draw. And I did get a lot of attention. It was very awkward.
Did people make any comments to you or just give you weird looks?
Just weird looks. No one asked anything.
Really? That's funny. Now, I wanted to ask you, how do you think psychology, or what role do you think psychology plays in the world today?
Well, psychology is all about understanding behavior, why people may act a certain way. And with the world today, we take a look at all these issues. And with social media, especially, people share almost everything. And so we can look at why do people share, why do people act a certain way. In our society right now, we're seeing a lot of issues that if you want to try and understand why people may feel that way, why people act that way, psychology helps you take a look at that.
Yeah. And you've been teaching psychology for a little while now. How
Right.
long has it been?
Oh boy, this is my 7th year teaching AP Psychology.
So how would you say that psychology has changed since you started?
Really, it hasn't. One of the big things that did change, though, is the DSM. The DSM is used to help people, or help psychologists and psychiatrists identify mental disorders. And since I started teaching, they redid the whole DSM. We're at the DSM-5 now, which changed the categories for mental disorders around, which added new mental disorders. Other than that, there really hasn't been any major change since I started teaching. There is more focus on the biological aspect now. With modern medicine, modern technology, we can really look at neurons in the brain and see the brain's process and stuff that we just never were able to years ago.
Yeah. And along with new perspectives and just learning a lot of new things, and students get a whole year of this class.
Right.
So how would you say that students at Hoover benefit from taking psychology?
Well, like I said, psychology is all about studying behavior, and I like to try and do it more introspective where students can apply to themselves. Throughout the year, we'll do assignments that when I talk about the material, I try to relate it to students' lives, especially with the brain. Okay, there's different parts of the brain. How does it affect you? Because you need to be able to identify the certain functions of the brain. We'll talk about memory and memory techniques that students can apply to themselves so that when they sit down and take these tests, they're able to recall the information through memory techniques and tricks. So I just try to make it more interactive, apply it to the student so they can use it in their real world situations.
Right. And Nick, you've been through a semester of psychology so far. So how would you say that this class has benefited you throughout the school year?
It helps me be a little more like keen and aware in like social situations, and I learned a lot of interesting things I find will help me later in life. So it just helps me be a little more keen.
Do you think you'll want to take any psychology courses in college, or how do you think it'll affect your future?
Yeah, I think I'll definitely take some psychology courses in college, at least 1 or 2. It will affect my future. I'll be a little more aware, like I said before, and it just helps out with your social life.
Right, and it's made you a little bit more aware. Have you noticed similar effects with your friends and those friend groups?
I think a little bit. Yeah, they haven't really talked about it, but I'm sure they're experiencing the same thing as me.
That's great. And just talking about the AP test, how does that kind of shape the course, making it for the AP test?
Well, with the AP test, the College Board pretty much says this is the material that could show up on the AP test. And so the whole year covers the standards that the AP Board has given everybody, or really everybody, teachers, to say, hey, this could be on it. So the whole year, it's unfortunate that we got to stick to the standards because that's what we have to cover. But at the same time, it's fun to create lessons so that it's, like I said, I try to make it interactive.
Right.
But you know, the AP College Board, they're in charge of the material. They tell us what's going to be on the test. So throughout the year, I'm focusing on the standards and the material that would show up on it.
Right. And Nick, does that do you feel the pressure for the AP test so far, or how are you feeling about it?
I feel a little pressure, but I'm sure Mr. Draher is going to get us through that, and he's going to tell us everything we need to know and prepare us.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for talking about me with psychology, and I really appreciate you guys coming around with me.
Oh, it's not a problem. Thanks
no
for
problem.
having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Wilhelm Wundt, the founding father of psychology, would be proud of discussions such as this. Psychology plays a vital role in society because of the self-awareness it promotes. Most of social structure is all in our minds, and we should not be afraid to break the norm if the occasion calls for it. Thanks for joining me on this episode of In the Spotlight. I hope to see you next time.